not, so much as revenue and whatnot, but it's people's lives changed, transformed. That's why we do radio here. And so the Bridge is a gospel center station, so what we do is all about Christ. And so just so you guys know, as I get into there will be some parts of revenue that I get into as far as the benefits of having live programming, what happens, your ROI, your return of investment. But I want to read this, Matthew 28:18-20. Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." Radio is, as my good friend Mark Schaefer, partners here that we were together there at K-Wave, it's a megaphone. Radio is a big megaphone, and it reaches people in places that you cannot be at. You know what I'm saying? I mean, you got people riding in a car, you got people working out at a gym. You can't be there, but radio can. And so you think about that. For us to have radio is amazing because we get to share the gospel with people in those places that you and I cannot be with them, And so we've seen, I'm sure you guys have stories, especially during this pandemic. I am sure God has done some amazing work with you guys. While everybody was shut out, radio wasn't. Everybody was tuning in to either television or radio. They wanted information, what's going on, what's happening, this and that. And so what we did is we took advantage of that. And what I mean by that is that we said, okay, how can we mobilize our station to share the gospel during this time where people are at home? Think about that. Everybody was home. Nobody could work. Everybody was working from home. And so you had organizations that went out and about to help those that were, COVID infected. Billy Graham and Franklin Graham came out and did a field hospital in Central Park. I went out there to interview those guys and put it on the radio. I mean, we were doing anything that we could just to get the word out, the gospel. And so when it comes to programming, we have pre-recorded programming, right? Most of us do, and I still do as well. And when it comes to pre-recorded content, that helps us create a polished and professional sound, right? It's easy. You can get on behind a mic, and you can just start talking, doing whatever, but then you have the luxury of editing, right, and making yourself sound really good, right? And that's the benefit of pre-recorded radio, which is fine. But when it comes to live programming, if you're an LPFM, if you're a station that is not staffed, a lot of people on staff, don't tune me out because there is something here for you. Because I don't want to talk over you, be like, oh, well, this is a full power station. This guy he's got the staff. He can do this. But listen, even as a small station, I used to run a station in upstate New York, Cherry Valley, New York, about 4.5 hours from here, WJIV. That's where I started my whole radio journey. I was pastoring a church. I planted a Calvary chapel right outside of Cooperstown, New York, and my side job was a radio station. And little did I know that experience I had would lead me on this journey of Christian radio up to today, to this day. And so I always say to people, never underestimate where God has you today. Because you just never know what God is going to do with that experience, that incident, whatever it is. God has a plan, a bigger plan than what you think. And so there were times that I was frustrated, but little did I know that God was actually preparing me for much more. And so now that we're here and now we're together, and when it comes to this, I've experienced a lot about radio. I've done it all. I've been a salesman. I've been in community relations. I've been a manager. I am not an engineer. So don't ask me questions about wires. Because I'm going to probably say, talk to Vic over there or talk to Bill over there. If my engineer was here, I'd say talk to him. In fact, he might even be here tomorrow. He said he was going to stop by. So if you do have any questions after this session about any technical thing, you can ask me and I'll say, I don't know, or maybe I do know. But he will hopefully be here tomorrow and he can give you the rundown. He was the one that totally revamped our studio, the one you're going to see. He was behind it all. And so what I do is, as far as management, I love being in the community. I love networking with pastors. Being a pastor myself, I know both worlds, right? I know the radio world and I know the pastoral world. So I can hang out and talk to pastors about radio, and I can hang out and talk to engineers about radio because I know those two worlds. And so when it comes to live programming, this is where I want to kind of just encourage you guys on some things. You guys have my outline there. I didn't want to do a PowerPoint. I figured if you want to jot notes on that, you can. But when it comes to the benefits of live programming, The first thing that comes to mind, and when you see this word investment, you're like, I don't have any money, Robert, so skip that, right? But listen, let me just say this to you. There's some equipment that I think you should have. It's worth the investment. The first thing is staffing, of course. That's where it starts, right? I mean, I know like when I was managing WJIV, it was only me. I was the only one in that station running the automation system. I had to export and import logs. Back in those days, I had to rip the program off CDs to put them into the system. You guys remember that? The whole ripping the CD, right? That's what it was called. And so I had to do that. So I would get all these programs on CDs, and I would put them into Adobe Audition and just rip them and put them into the automation. I did that every week. And then I would export my logs. And so I had to wait for that. And so I was also the engineer, if you will, because when the station went down, we had an old RCA backup transmitter. That's old school. And this thing had a blower, right? And so you had to turn on the blower to warm it up first. It's kind of like a car, right? You turn it on, you let it warm up before you drive it. And then I had to go down to the transmitter, and the actual, our tower was right on our property, and I would go into the shed, open it up, and I had to do something that I can't believe they had me do this, where I had to get the copper wiring, right, the copper tube, and I had to make sure that that transmitter was turned off, and then I would have to unscrew and change the copper tube to the other side, and if I had this thing turned on, I would zap myself and I'd be dead. That's how dangerous it was, right? And I had to do that. Once I did that, then I can go upstairs, turn on the thing, and the station's back up. That's what I had to do. So I ran it on my own. The owner, which still owns that station up there, he's basically, he owns a lot of stations in the Ohio Valley, and he's just cheap. He doesn't want to do anything with the station. He's sitting on one of Pat Robertson's, they call it the Ivy League. He had a bunch of stations up in the New York area, and that was one of them, JIV. And so it's an old Adobe building that when the wind hits it, it would rock. And it had shaggy rug over the studio for sound. And it had a hole in the building that where wasp would come in. And so when I would be on the air, a wasp would come, like, whoa, I'm like, oh man, and they would go up into the lighting. It was pretty crazy. I did my time. That was my purgatory for radio. And then I get hired at K-Wave, and Pastor Chuck and Richard McIntosh at the time hired me on the spot. They were looking for a pastor and a radio guy, and here I come in K-Wave, all Mac, beautiful studio. I'm like, I'm in heaven. I'm like, this is great. I'm like, tears in my eyes. I'm like, this is amazing. This studio is amazing, right? And so I've done that. You know, I've gone through all of that stuff. So when it comes to investment, staff, questions that you have to ask yourself. If you want to do something live, who runs the board? Who controls the lines if you have phone lines? Who manages your recordings? If you do an in-house program like we started, Bridge Bible Talk, who can be the host? Who has radio experience when it comes to hosting? You want to have a radio person on. You don't want to have anybody behind the mic that is going to sound a little funky, right? Radio is important, right? Sound quality. If somebody tunes in and the voice behind that mic is not up to par, they're going to tune you out, right? They're amateurs. And so it's important to have somebody who's quality that can be behind a mic. And so when it comes to equipment, you know, do you need to upgrade your board? You know, when I got here almost 3 years ago, we had an old board that was donated to us by K-Wave many years ago. It was a big board. That was the first thing that had to go. It was limited. It wasn't running up to par, so we had to invest in a brand new board, which we did, because that gave us the first part of our capability of doing anything live in that studio. The other thing is a phone system, call-ins. You know, when it comes to phone systems, when you do call-ins, programs, you have your listeners call you in, what it adds interaction and it adds immediacy. Right away, you know you have people listening. I love that part of radio because you have people that call you on the spot. You're like, oh, we have somebody listening, right? If nobody calls, all right, maybe it's the wrong timing. We'll try this at 5 o'clock, right? And the other thing is a remote unit. How many of you guys here have a remote unit? Raise your hand if you have a remote unit. Okay, there's a couple of you. Listen, they're pricey. Yeah, you better, because we do have one big. Remote units, listen, there's the old Comrex unit, right? They have newer ones, smaller ones, they're easy to carry. I would encourage you to create an account as a nonprofit business under your church. That's what I do. To go to and I have the website there, right? The BW, hold on, I just missed it. BSWUSA.com. Those guys are great. They have everything radio related. And if you're on there, if you have an account with them and you're under their nonprofit organization account, you get some super good deals. The Comrax that I think is the best is the Comrax NX Access, okay? It's just a small little a square computer. It's about this size, actually. It's got 2 outputs, 2 channels, so you could only have 2 people on it, okay? It goes for $4,000. You're like, oh man, are you serious? But listen, if you're a nonprofit, you get it for under $4,000. How much did we pay, Vic? You remember what it was? It was like $3,700 or something like that? $3,800 at the end, something like that. So you get a really good discount. Now you can add a mixer. The mixer is about $1,000, which gives you 4 more channels. So now you can have up to 6 people on the radio. But we added the mixer just because I think it's good to have. But you don't have to have the mixer. But you have this small little unit, this NX Access remote unit. You can go, and you guys know this, you can go anywhere in the world that has internet. And you can remote into your studio anywhere. That adds a little more to your station because now if you can do that, you can bring people in live, or you can go out. That's what I did. I went out to to New York City, do a remote from there. I've done remotes before. I know that Merritt Island we did Bridge Bible Talk from there, but I used your studio. But I could have easily brought my remote unit, plugged it in, just hardwired in with the internet, and boom, I'm on. I connect directly to my studio. Wonderful, wonderful thing. So pray about adding that to your station because I guarantee you it's going to be so worth it. It's worth doing that. And so the other thing that I added, this is a luxury. It's called a Comrax Opal for guests. And what this is an IP audio gateway. And what this is basically, this enables guests to call in to your studio simply by clicking a link. That's all you got to do. You just click a link and they automatically connect to your studio. Of course, you have to configure that on your end with your engineer. And all you do, you give them the link, or there's an app on their phone. And they can just go on their app. They don't have to have any engineers on their end. For example, for Bridge Bible Talk in November, we're going to have J. Warner Wallace coming in. So he's going to be coming in to us live from California, but I'm going to get him in through the Opal, Comrax Opal. Because what this does is an HD quality sound that sounds better than being on the phone. You know how most calls that come into the radio station sounds like this? This eliminates that, and it sounds like they're with you in the studio. And so this was, I can't remember how much this was. If you're interested, let me know. I can always look up at some of my past buys here at this. But that's another thing to do if you want to. So in other words, you could say, well, I don't want to spend $4,000 on a Comrax unit. Can I just use this? Yes, you can. But the only thing, it limits you from going out and remoting in. You see what I'm saying? So if you want to just stay in your studio and you want to send the links out to people to call in, that's fine if you want to work it that way. I like to have both options. I like to be there with the remote unit on location, and I also like to have somebody, I can bring in anybody that I want, because you're not going to fly in a J. Warner Wallace, right? You're not going to fly in somebody of that caliber because they either, one, their schedules are tight or they can be expensive, right? And so it's easy to say, here you go. Can you come in? Can you call in? So I contacted him. In fact, if you ever want to have him on your station, let me know. I have the contact info. He's very, very cool, very, very outgoing guy, and he's for this. So if you ever want to do a special edition on something with him on, if you want to do an interview with him, let me know. He will do it. He's like, yeah, I'd love to do it, and he's out in California. So that's a good thing. So the Opal is like it's like a cell phone computer with a microphone. So in other words, they can do it in any way they want. So that's the investment, right? There's a little investment when it comes to having your studios become capable of doing live stuff. The second thing that I have here is why live programming. I kind of shared a little bit of why, but it gives you fresh and relevant content. Guys, content is king in radio, right? Sometimes we air old, past, radio programs, teaching programs, right? And sometimes what they give you are old broadcasts or old teachings. And so they date themselves. They're talking about 2000, a year 1999, whatever, right? And when you hear it, you're like, oh, man, they should have edited that out. You know what I'm saying? They're talking about the wrong president, all right? Or they're talking about the wrong event that happened. And that's the only thing with pre-recording is that you don't know what you're going to get. And you're not going to tell that ministry to say, hey, make sure that there's no dates on here or no events that are 10 years old, okay? They're not going to do it because that's going to cost them more to try to go through and edit. If they have a good person who edits, then they might do that. But it gives you fresh and relevant content. The other reason why live programming is because it's popular. I don't know about you, but when I'm on the radio, I tune in more to live programming than I do pre-recorded. If I hear somebody who's there now, I feel like they're with me because they're there, they're live. This is not a pre-recorded program. They're going to talk about relevant things. They're going to talk about just real time. That's what it is. And so that gives a whole different feel when it comes to people tuning in on the other side of the radio. I mean, if you think about the way radio has changed, the landscape is changing the way people are consuming radio and the way they're consuming music, the way they're consuming media. If you think about Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, they all went with the capability of what? Live. Because everybody wants to see what you're doing right now, not what you did a week ago or 10 days ago. They want to know what's going on. When I'm on my Instagram account, it says, so-and-so is live. What are they doing? Oh, they're walking through the park. Oh, that's it. I wonder what's going on. You know what I'm saying? It's you know what it is? It's actually legal voyeurism is what it is. That's what I call that live stuff. Because you're going into somebody's space that's supposed to be private, but they're allowing you. You see what I'm saying? You can't just go into your neighbor's house and look through the window. It's like, what are they doing right now? You know what I'm saying? You go to jail. But see, social media and just, they're giving you the permission. That's what I call it, legal voyeurism, because you get to see what they're doing right there on the spot. When it comes to radio, think about it, live. If the social media world is doing things that are live, then I want to do things live on radio because people are still tuning into live stuff. And I think one of the benefits here when it comes to this is that people like to not just watch things in real time, but they want to hear things in real time. Live radio, whether it's a call-in show, whether you have a live on-air talent, just, hey, this is so-and-so, we're here, it's 12 o'clock, and coming up next, that's all live. And if they start talking about things that are present, like, anything that has to do with an event coming up the next day, the next week, maybe a news article or something that relates to the people now, people tune in, they say, oh, they're in real time. I want to tune in, I want to stay tuned in. It also helps people feel more closely connected to you when you're doing something live. It makes listening more enjoyable when the one on the radio is live during the commute. We always get that. Bridge Bible Talk, we get a lot of people listening on their way home. When they end up calling us in for a Bible question, they'll say, yeah, I'm on my way home. I love listening to this program on my way home. It's my program. It gives them something to do. If it's a 30-minute or an hour drive home, if they're coming from New York City down south to here, or if they're going upstate New York, which is maybe Poughkeepsie from New York City is another hour, they have something to listen to. And I remember in California on the freeways, my drive to work was about 20 minutes. Or even if before that, if I had to drive 45 minutes somewhere, if I found a live program to keep me entertained for that drive, instead of watching 8 lanes around me of cars just flying by, I want to listen to something. I want to hear somebody right now. And so people tune in to Bridge Bible Talk between 3 and 4 because that's their commute home. And so they listen. It's enjoyable. It makes their drive so much fun, right? And so it gives people that enjoyment when it comes to that. When it comes to feedback, when you have something live, you get instant feedback, which is really cool. And I think that's what Bridge Bible Talk has helped us with, is good feedback. A lot who are tuning in, like I said, are going home. They say it's good content, and we want to keep it good content. Especially when it comes to a live Q&A. Listen, if you're a pastor, you can just get on behind that mic, grab somebody who's well-versed in the Bible, and start something for 30 minutes. Just go live. Just start answering questions, or even take questions at the start. Like what we did is this. We started on this stage March 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. We got hit here hard with COVID. When they shut down, March 16th, I believe, is when the shutdown happened here. When New York was just getting crazy with COVID, it came down here. And we didn't know what was going on. We didn't shut down at all until things got serious and we realized, oh, man, okay, a few people passed away, unfortunately, from our church because of this. And so Pastor Lloyd and I, we were talking, and I said, hey, let's do something live. And with the help of Marshall, who's in the back, and his wife, Lisa, these guys, we got them together, and we're like, okay, how do we do this? And we came up with a plan. We just came up here, set up we set a stage with couches and stuff. We went live online on the website, and then we did the radio just once a week. And because we did not have a phone system for call-ins, we had a number that I would promote on the program once a week, say, hey, call this number. And we would get people calling in that number or email us questions. And so I took all of this every week, and then when we came to the program, I would take those questions, and Pastor Lloyd and I would answer the questions. And then what I would do then is if calls came in, they were able to leave a message. So what I did then is I took the message, I put it into my production software, and I cut it, edited it all, and then I would play it. And so I would say, all right, well, we have another question from John from the Bronx, New York. John, what's your question? And it's a pre-recorded. My question is blah, 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 blah. All right, good, thank you, Matt. You know what I'm saying? You can do that. And we still do that even to this day. People call in to this line. They can leave a message, and I'll prep it up to be an actual call. I'll cut it where he says, yeah, I'm calling in because, I just cut it right to the question. My question is, and nobody knows. It's great, it's magic, right? It's radio, yeah, radio magic. So that is one thing. So we did it live once a week, and then we just start praying about we need to do something with our studio. So in the meantime, we started putting together, just knocking down walls and just going crazy with construction, trying to get this studio up to par so we can do it there Monday through Friday. It's been big for Pastor Lloyd because, he's got other things to do, but he's been very well dedicated and committed to it, which has been a blessing. And so finally for, I don't know how long did we go on Bridge Bible Talk? You remember, Gina? Was it like about a year, maybe, right? Yeah, so once we hit our year, then we had a launch date for live, and we switched gears. So the month before, I would say, okay, we're going to be going live. This is our launch date. And then when the studios were ready to go, this was where it was like a trial and error, right? Because you're walking into a studio, you've never done it before, and we went live. And that first month, people were calling in because we already prepped people. And you can do that. You can prep people by doing something small before you go big. And so I already kind of reached out to people. People knew about the program. Now we're going Monday to Friday. And it became a blessing to a lot of people. And so that is one aspect of live radio, doing live programming. You can also do current events. It keeps you up to date with current events, trends. Again, live broadcast allows for true instant interaction for the audience. I also mentioned that it entertains people. It keeps people tuned in. That's the thing about radio, isn't it? It's like you want to keep people there, right? You want people to come back. The nightmare of any radio station is that you have bad content where people just say, I don't want to listen to this station. I'm going to go to the next one. And so it's on us to make sure that our content is relevant, it's fresh, and it's engaging. You want to have people on the air that are not going to have coffee, small talk on the air because people don't care about that. What is going to draw people in? Fresh content, good content that's going to captivate the mind. That's like, oh, well, that's interesting. One thing that I do once in a while for Bridge Bible Talk is I'll allow crazy calls to come in. And when I mean crazy, I'm not saying like really out there, but I allow certain things because people like that kind of stuff. People like it like, oh, wow, how are they going to answer this one? We've had some really crazy calls. We had a lady that called one time who says that, I've been looking up at the clouds, and God has been giving me some interesting messages from clouds. And let me tell you, I saw a puppy, and she's way out there. And I'm like, oh, how do you answer this? Because her question is, this must be God, right? What do you say? No, lady, you're crazy. It's not God. You have to be like, what I use with any kind of those experiences, I say, well, ma'am, what you're having is a subjective experience, and so we can't really judge that based on Scripture. It's not in the Bible, but it's a subjective experience. It's nothing objective. You can't find verses for that. And then I just kind of go off about the importance of allowing the Bible to interpret our experiences. And it's been good. And there's been others that have called in that want to debate you. And I always say, the format is not a debating kind of format. We won't debate anybody here. However, if you want us to continue to talk with you, email us. I always throw them the email. But we get some guys called. We get a lot of Seventh-day Adventists that will call us about the Sabbath. And we go through these seasons of just a constant flow of, why don't you keep the Sabbath? Well, why is it on Sunday? There's one guy that calls a lot. And when I see his name, I'm like, here we go, and I'll keep him on there as long as I can because I know where he's going. But he always puts the question differently every time, but it always ends to when Jesus was crucified. That's his thing. I don't believe he was crucified on Friday. I said, listen, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Jesus died on the cross. We know that, right? We know that. And so the same thing with the end times. We had questions about people say, I don't believe in the rapture. Can you prove it? So yeah, John 14, chapter 14, 1 through and 3. You go hear it. I don't believe it. It says, all right, well, listen, at the end of the day, we're all going to be in heaven. Okay? However we get there, we're going to be there. I'll explain to you on the way up, I tell them. I throw a joke, right? But people like that. Really. I mean, come on, think about it. If you're listening to a program and somebody calls in, you're like, ooh, I want to check this one out. Well, how are they going to answer this one? So I allow them once in a while when they come in because I know others like that. And I've gotten responses from people, replies rather, that they say, you know what? I listened to you and that one call that you got, I was wondering how you guys going to answer that, so it's curiosity. I want to keep people curious because when they tune in every day, 3 to 4, they're anticipating, all right, let's see what they're going to get this time, And so that helps that interaction. It helps entertain in that sense. When it comes to the people with theological differences, I always say too, I always say on the program, I say, hey, listen, if you're not a Christian and you're listening to this program, please call. We'll take. If you want to know what we believe and why we believe, please call us. We'll take your call. We're not going to deny you. However, we're not going to debate you. And we've had non-Christians call before. Hey, I'm not a Christian, but you guys believe, and they go off like that. But then it gives us a chance to share the gospel, and to find out more about them. Of course, we can't spend 20 minutes with them, but there are some that call in. And I know, living in New York, being in New York City, and it's a very big Roman Catholic area, and also it's an intellectual area, right? New York City, and so we get some of those brainiacs that call in, thinking that they know better than us, and we'll deal with them, but we won't go too far with them. And when they don't want the answer, we just move on. Say, well, thank you for your call, and email us if you have any more questions. But again, it's good because it gives you that opportunity to engage with people. The last part here, as I'm kind of ending here with this last one, is revenue. Because again, if you're going to invest money on live programming, can I get this back, Robert? You can. It's going to take time, though. This is your ROI, right? Your return on investment. What this helps me when it comes to live programming, it gives me this audience research, if you will, where people listen from. It will test your signal reach. I was talking to a brother today at our breakfast today. He's from Pennsylvania, from Scranton. Scranton's about maybe 2.5 hours from here. And I said, you know what? We get calls from there. How do you know? Because I get them in, they call in. And it's like that far up. And we hit parts of Pennsylvania. Sometimes it goes that far, depending on the atmosphere, obviously. But it tests your signal. The other thing is it motivates people to support what they hear. Donations. We started a website for Bridge Bible Talk, and I put a donation button on it. And it's like people want to give, they can. It's up to them. It doesn't matter. We always tell them sometimes, too, on the radio, it's like, hey, whatever station you're listening to, because we're on other networks, support your local radio station, because it's important for them to do that as well. The other thing is, it gives you a good idea of the age of people calling, when we do that. And so, again, it gauges that. The other opportunity for me is it helps sell airtime. National programs, they're going to want to be around any live programming. Whether somebody's live on the air or whether you have a program that's live, they're going to want that. And now I have the confidence to say, well, you can buy time between 2 and 3 or 4 and 5. It's a well-listened program. Well, how do you know? Because I host it and I get the calls. I know it works. It's working. I don't need Nielsen rating. I could tell you just within that hour, it's prime time, it's premium because of that. And so it helps you sell airtime. You know where people are calling from, listening from, how old your listeners are. And the other thing is, we have a break between at the bottom of the hour that you can also sell airtime as well. And as you guys take us, some of your networks, you can use that break because you guys go back to your local, as we do our local. You got 3 minutes there to sell your airtime. Right there, if you air Bridge Bible Talk, you can use those 3 minutes to sell premium time because it's a live program. And it helps, and you can determine your rate, as we do here. It also helps me determine my rate sheet. We're considered to be in the New York market. The New York market is the #1 media market, right? And so we reach New York City. When somebody says, well, how do you know you reach there? It says, because I know for sure that between the prime time, drive time, I'm getting calls from Bronx, I'm getting calls from Staten Island, all the 5 boroughs, right? Manhattan, we got a lot from Manhattan, a lot from Brooklyn. And now I'm asking, what neighborhood in Brooklyn are you calling from? Because Brooklyn is the biggest borough, 2 million people. It's the biggest borough, I believe, in New York City. So I want to know, what neighborhood are you guys calling from? So I know what locations in Brooklyn are they coming from. And it helps, right, to know those things. And so those are some of the things that, I wanted to kind of encourage you guys. I know I said a lot. I don't know how you guys are interpreting all of this, but there is an investment for it. I would say get your remote unit, start with that. If you don't, set up an Comrex Opal line where you can bring people in if you don't want to be traveling out. If you're like, I don't go out because I don't have the people, then just get an Opal line and have people come in and find time in your programming to do something live. But if you're like, well, I can't go live, I don't have the capability, then that's where the investment comes in to say, okay, how can you do this? My engineer, I asked him before this, I said, if there's an LPFM that is very limited with funds and they can't just spend a lot of money to do a whole new studio like we did, is there ways they can do it? And he goes, yes, they can. And so if he, hopefully he's here tomorrow, if you guys are interested, you guys can talk to him and he will give you the rundown of what you can do to start small first, to get something going, to start putting something live on the radio, even if it's once a week or once a day, test it, and people, you'll know who's calling and what's going on. So those are the things that I think make radio much more engaging. People tune in, is when you have fresh content, especially when it becomes live. If you don't have live announcers, I know I have 3 voice trackers and I have 1 finally live on-air person. Her name is Lee, between 2 and 6 p.m. I trained her, I've been training her, and she goes behind the mic, and it's awesome because now I'm not strapped with voice trackers because they are not here. They're from other places, and so if I want to announce something happens, right, I can't, they've already done their voice track. They can't go back and put the announcement in. Now I have somebody between the prime time to say, hey, can you make this mention? Or what happens if an event happens here, like a 9/11, right? We can actually reach people and say, oh, these guys are relevant. They know what's going on. But my voice trackers are a week and a half behind. We're going to sound kind of funny if all of a sudden, like, wow, man, look what just happened, Ashley. And these guys are not saying anything about it. They're like, woo, they're talking about this and that. But now I have somebody at the midday that they can actually help us with those current events if we need to. So anyways, God bless you guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me afterward. Or you can ask me now.
Yeah, if you have any questions, let's ask now.
You probably already answered this, but why 3 p.m.? Now, I know we play you live on our radio, but how do you determine 3 p.m. is the
I wanted to get as close to the afternoon drive time as possible. That's why. And Pastor Lloyd too. We've had a few that have said, can you guys go 2 hours? It's like 3 to 5. One, I have programming on there that are paid programming, and so his schedule, my schedule, it'd be a lot to do that, and to say, and I've had others say, why don't you guys do 6 o'clock, 6 to 7? And again, schedule, right? Pastor Lloyd is gone, and I go home, and so we're kind of using the 3 to 4 p.m. It's working, really well, and so at the moment we're just going to keep it there. If any changes, then we can pray through that. But because it's working, we'll just keep it there. But thank you, good question.
Just a quick question for you. In commercial radio, they consider morning drive to be the primo time of the day, most expensive, et cetera. Coming over to Christian radio like this, I notice a lot of people that do live are doing it in the afternoons. Is that because of just availability, personnel, time slot? Or?
It's the market. I mean, think about the New York City. We're 45 minutes from New York City. You're like maybe 30 minutes from the Holland Tunnel. That's Lower Manhattan. Route 9 here goes up to the Garden State Parkway, gets on 95, the main artery that truckers drive, right, south, right? You guys, if those that drove from Virginia, Florida, you came on that 95. So people that go home are already pouring into those areas by like 3 o'clock, 3:30 maybe. And you have the NJ Transit, which is a bus, because people commute here on bus or train, bus and train. So everybody has to be to the train station in Manhattan or wherever they're taking the train at a certain time so they can get home early enough. So you have a flow of people coming in between 3 and 6, all coming home. If you go home, if you head out here around 3:30-ish maybe, or a little bit before, you start seeing the traffic coming in, coming back, all the New York City people coming back on 95 and the Garden State Parkway coming in. Because right now, if you go up in the morning, it's bumper to bumper on 9 going up until it frees to go up. So I figured, 3 to 4 p.m., let's try this. And, I think if we moved it to 6 p.m., we'd probably get even more people, because now you got more people commuting. But the ones that we've realized are either home, or they're working from home, or some are already coming home, driving. We get a lot of truckers that call in. I got a guy calling in from Staten Island last week. And we have another guy going up to upstate New York and Syracuse called us. You know what I'm saying? So we get truckers that will listen and tune into the program. And I asked him, how did you find us? He goes, just going through the dial, and I start listening to you guys, and it sounded interesting. You see what I'm saying? It sounded interesting. And that's why I say content is important. That's why.
You said for guests, the Comrex Opal, but is it something different if you're for callers? That's a different thing?
Yeah, because this is for guests. So these are more for guests. You wouldn't use this for general.
So you need different equipment for live call-in?
Yes. I have a software that goes with our phone system that we have there. It's a digital line. And so the software is connected through our board that comes to a screen. I have a call screener that sits in another room that takes those calls in, puts in where they're from, what the question is, and then she sets it ready to go. And then on my screen inside the studio, I look, and when it's ready to go, I go to it. You see what I'm saying? So it's an easy transition.
And then I had another part of that question. I'm just thinking, what if I had different guys answer questions, 5 days a week, and maybe some of them are a little bit of a distance. Is there some sort of way where they wouldn't have to come to the studio, and they could? Does that connect to the Opal?
So yeah, that's where the Opal would come in.
Okay.
But the Opal.
They can still. So we'd have one thing to receive calls.
Yep.
But they're still connected. Another pastor's connected somewhere out there. And
You
they're
can.
hearing it, and they're on. Okay.
Yep, you can. But you only get 2 lines with the Opal. You get a guest line and a home line.
Okay.
A channel rather, because it's on your board. It says Opal. You go to your channel and you can get both in. So you designate two links, 2 lines, if you will.
Get Damien Kyle. Anybody else? Oh, Alan?
I don't know if this is was just answered, but I know that during COVID, we did all of our interviews. We didn't have guests in the studio, so we used an Opal line.
Yep, that's the same one.
And so I'd have 2 guests in 2 different locations coming in to me. If I did that, is there a way that could substitute for Comrex if I'm out somewhere and I have those 2 lines and I have someone in the studio? Can I be on one of those lines, someone else my guest on another line, and that could substitute for a
Yes.
Comrex unit?
You can. Yep.
As long as you have someone in the studio
Correct. To bring you up live. Yeah, you need somebody to you need a board op.
So that might be a...
Yeah, there is a way to do, I was going to do this, but I got scared because, when it comes to anything automated, there's always room for error, right? And so my engineer says, we can set you up where you can have an actual, I can configure this system where you can just at a certain time, it would bring up the fader, right? It's all digital, you know, and I said, well, what are the likelihood of having making any errors or something, it got stuck or software issues? He goes, well, that's what you have to think about. And I don't want that, right? You don't want to do that live, you know, especially when networks are taking you. You don't want to mess around with that. So it's easier just to do it there with somebody manning the board.
And then the other thing was, I know one of the reasons we like the 3 o'clock hour for the live show is because all the moms picking up the kids from school. too.
Yeah,
That's
and we do,
really
yeah.
good reason.
Yeah, and we
They're
do.
all out in their cars, so.
And we get calls from kids, and I encourage that too, and we get some good calls.
So my question was, I thought you were saying when you started the live call-in that you wrote your questions out, you guys got your answers for
Yeah.
them, you edited them?
We prepared.
So you just say, hey, here's 5 questions, you and your pastor sit down, you go through them.
Yep.
You get the answers for them, and then you just kind of, like, here's a 5-minute answer for this question, here's a 5-minute
Yep.
answer. And
Yep.
so that's how you started
Yeah.
before you went to live.
Correct. We already had the questions that came in the week before on email, or if I had one that was left as a message. And so I usually for an hour programs, this is where you have to have a good host, right? You got to know what you're doing because, as you guys know in radio, you know, you don't want to have any silence, right? You want to have somebody that can keep it going.
Right.
You want somebody that can host and keep it going, moderate, drive the train. Otherwise, if you have any funky, well, let's see. Boy, we're almost out of questions. You don't say that, right? I mean, just to talk. You just got to keep it rolling. So, yeah. And so you want to have 10 questions. That's my thing is I want to have at least 10 questions for an hour program.
Okay.
But I'm going to balance it out with questions that are coming on the phone.
Right, so we got, like, our church has a text messaging thing that
Yeah, that's good too.
you could ask anything. But I was thinking of, because my pastor, he's real radio shy.
Yeah.
So I want to, if someone want to call Troy Drake,
Yeah, you want to have somebody that, yeah.
but just dropping him out there. But, if we, because I said, well, why don't we get like 15 questions? You can answer these questions. And then we just kind of segue them into so it sounds live. And you did that starting one day a week.
One day a week, we did it, yeah.
And then, so how long did that take you? Do you remember how long that took you to produce that?
To produce it, well, I mean, we did it live, right? So we did it from up here for 1 hour. And so we prepared, the questions were prepared already. We came up here, we came early, test the mics and on, then we just went live. And then I just start talking as if, hey, welcome to Bridge Bible Talks, Baltodano, with me is Pastor Lloyd Pulley, and blah, 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 blah. You just go do your intro, and then you just roll. You go from there, and you start answering the questions. But you got to be careful not to, this is what you don't want to do. You don't want to go like question 1, question 2, question. You want to have some breathing time in between to chew on it a little more, to talk about something too, related to it. You don't want to just be so strict to the questions. Maybe something else will branch off of your head that would be like, well, we just answered about Revelation 3, and I see that this and this, but what about, you know what I mean? You make it interesting. You build on it so that you're not just limited to just question 1, question 2, because then it's going to sound kind of boring after a while, right? Yeah. You want to make it. You want to be creative. That's the thing. Any host has to be creative in what they say, what they do, right? But it takes time. I've done it for a while. I did it in California when Chuck was around Pastor's Perspective. I did it again later on, and then coming on here and doing it here. I've kind of had the experience and to keep it rolling. You don't want to have anybody shy behind the mic,
Right.
because they're going to clamp up on you, and then you're going to have to make up that. You see what I'm saying? When they're like,
Yeah.
so, Don Stewart was crazy on this. You would say, so Don, in John chapter 3, verse 16, they're saying that this is not Jesus. Is that true? Not true. Can you elaborate? Can you elaborate? Why isn't it true? You know what I mean? That's where the host comes in to pull it out. Otherwise, you're done. Then you're like, okay, next one. Ooh, that was bad.
I just wanted to clarify, when you talked about editing then, call-ins, that was in the beginning, or you still do that?
I do.
Okay, so those calls are calls from days or last week that you fit in to other live calls?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so you always have a full slot of.
Yeah, so
questions.
we have, you have to be prepared. So I have my questions on paper from email.
Yeah.
And for social media, because we're on live, I forgot to mention, we're live on YouTube and Facebook.
Right.
So I always go to them. And for you watching on Facebook and YouTube, post your question, I'll take it. So we get questions from them in real time. So we have a guy, Kyle, who's my video guy, is monitoring Facebook, and he'll text me, hey, this is from Facebook, this is from YouTube. So I incorporate those to the live questions that are coming in and my questions on paper.
Okay.
You just got to know how to balance it, because you don't want to burn through your questions.
You're right.
Because then if you don't have that many calls, now what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
Sing?
By the way, we just bought the new NX. We use it for live.
Oh, good.
Live football games.
Yeah, you guys are, yeah.
And it works absolutely great.
Yeah, good.
We do have an older unit that maybe somebody out here would like. Still works, but it
Yeah.
might be available.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Merritt Island is one of the few who does
Sports.
football,
Sports.
and it's really incredible, and just what you guys have been able to do with that. I mean, we were just talking about that, having their banner right on a government school facility, and then trying to do some promotional on it. How awesome is that?
Yeah.
So really being out there. Anybody else? Questions? Yeah, sports,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
It's high school.
High school.
Yeah, they do
Yeah.
high school, right?
It-
High school.
And please talk to Maureen about that. They have done that a long time, yes. Yeah.
I was just going to add that if you do get the new Comrex NX and you have a problem with it, Vic will be available by telephone to help you, as he has done. Thank you.
I call him Vic the Brick. You guys remember Vic the Brick on the West Coast? Vic the Brick? Anyways, he's a radio personality guy. He's annoying. But not that he's annoying. Sorry, Vic. All right.
Yes, thank you, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So as we go through, I'm not doing a talk this year, but in between our messages, I just want you to kind of think of these topics that we're not doing this year because we're not doing any breakout. So each time I'm going to talk about a topic that I want you to think about. And the first one is, how do you sound online, on the radio? When I wanted to do radio in Myrtle Beach, we have, who has K-Love in their market? Raise your hand. I have K-Love in my market. K-Love's got $1 bazillion. It's kind of unfair, right? But they sound incredible, do they not? So this was my philosophy. I wanted to sound as good as K-Love, but have teaching. That was my goal. I have that, and I've reached that. If you switch between K-Love and us, you cannot tell the difference in audio quality. That's important, to sound the best that you can. Because if you sound like a radio station in a can, right, they're not going to be there long. So how do you sound? That takes processing. I was telling Robert that Avionics has some really, and Ben's not here this time. Usually we have him. He's really nice to have, but you're processing out of your station. If you're using some automated stuff, even Station Playlist has some basic processing built into their software that can make you sound even better. So how do you sound? Do you need some help with that? Come talk to us, Kevin and myself. Well, who's your engineer coming? Your engineer is coming tomorrow? Okay. If not, just come talk to us. We'll try to help you. You need to spend, I'm a senior pastor, so in a church like this, where do you spend your money? Well, Pastor Chuck always taught us chairs, air conditioning, sound. That's where you spend your money. And when I come and do a consulting with churches, and when they don't have one of those, right, your butt can only handle so much. Your ears can only handle so much. And the climate can, right, you get fidgety. Well, you have to have quality. You spend the money in the areas that you need to have quality, so those listeners are coming back. Like, this is good. I like this sound. I like K-Wave. I like the bridge. I'm hearing a good quality, and so I'm going to stay there. So that's our top. That's the first one, and then we'll go through these lists. Bill wants those.